Hello, it's Mrs. McCullough, and this is the last lesson in our series about how readers compare text. So far, we've learned that when you are reading two texts, that you have to first list all of the details for text A over here on the left-hand side of the T chart. Then you have to list all of the details and your thoughts from text B over here on the right-hand side of the T chart. Then in step 3, you group related information together. And we learned that in the last lesson, that when you're reading informational text, you have to look at all the details and try to put some together that makes sense in a group. And once you do that, then you look over here at text B and see if you can come up with any groupings for some of those details. And if you can, then it's time to name the category. It's time to put a label on it. And that's what we learned to do talking about apples and oranges. Now, remember that it's easy to compare something that's the same. What's hard is comparing something that's very different. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, how are these two very different things similar? It's like comparing apples to oranges. And that's what we did last time. We came up with the categories for our sort for apples to oranges. But you know what? You're not really done comparing. No, all you've done is put stuff on a T-chart. That's not really the point of this. The point is the thinking that you do to try to determine, how are these two things similar? And that's what happens down here. You go across every row and you start to think, this item and this item are similar because they both have, or so-and-so and so-and-so are alike because they both do. Some of those words we'll use as we start to look across each row. And then, you know what readers do? They write that information down. If you can say it, you can write it. And so let's go back to our passage that we were working on for apples and oranges. You see it here? Apples and oranges. So we did the sort over in my pocket chart in the last lesson, and we sorted things around. Well, I added them to this chart here so that we could see it all nice and organized. And we figured out the categories, that all of these details are about the outside of the apple and the orange. And all of these details are about the inside of the apple and the orange. We had a couple details, because you have to have at least two, for how it's made. And then we had a couple of details for what to do with it. So now it's time for us to look across the rows and figure out what these two very different objects have in common. Now, let's look at this sheet for just a minute. So we're going to look across each row and we're going to think about how they're similar. And here are some of the transition words that we might use in our writing. We can say it orally first, and then we'll put it into writing. So apples and oranges both have, or apples and oranges are alike because, okay, they could be exactly the same, or they could just be similar. They don't have to be verbatim, like the exact same words on the T-chart. We have to engage our thinking voice when we start thinking through this T-chart, and we have to try to see how these pieces on each side of the T-chart are similar, okay? Not exactly the same, but similar. So now let's try it out. Let's go across the rows. So we'll start here with the outside category. We have red and orange. They're colors, but they're not really similar, right? And then we have skinnier at the bottom and perfectly round. And then we have roundish, because it's a little skinnier at the bottom, and a sphere. So I'm starting to see things like roundish and sphere and round, and my thinking voice is also checking the picture, and I think they're kind of similar, maybe not exactly the same, but similar. So how could I say that? Apples and oranges are similar because they are both round in shape. We even use that word roundish and round. And so that's how I could write it in a sentence using my transition words. And so here it's on pink because it's my inference. This is what I'm really thinking about when I'm comparing. Apples and oranges are similar because they are round in shape. So I'm going to add that over here to my chart. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's see. We have thin skin and thick skin. Unless I want to say they both have skin. It's very, very different. How about smooth and bumpy? No. Long stem, button stem. Well, again, they both have skin. They both have stems. I don't know. Maybe we could say something with that. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Seeds inside, seeds inside. You see that? Okay, so what words would we put together? Are similar? Well, similar means they're not exactly, and they both have seeds. Maybe they're alike. You want to say that? Okay, so how about apples and oranges are alike because they have seeds inside. So we're looking across the rows. We're looking across the rows and seeing what we have. Okay, so let's look at another one here. Let's look at a few more. Let's see. Grows in northern climates, grows on trees. Grows on trees, grows in southern climates. Okay, so how that's kind of going across then, one's in the north and one's in the south, but they both do what? They both grow on trees. Okay, so how would your thinking voice want to say that? Apples and oranges are alike. You want to say it like that? Or you know what word we were using a lot? We were using the word both. You want to try that? Okay, so apples and oranges both, we don't want have, are, you want to use that one? Both are grown on trees. How about that? Does that sound good? Okay, so that is an example of a pink inference because you're going across the rows. Across the rows. That's what you're doing. Okay, let's see. Can you think of anything else as we look across? Oh my goodness, look at that. These are exactly the same. So, what would your thinking voice say? Let's do the eat one, okay? Let's do that one first. So how do you want to say that? Apples and oranges are similar because you eat them? I don't know. Apples and oranges are alike. Why? Use your thinking voice. Because you eat them. Okay, so here's an example of an inference. So we can go across the rows and we can start to see how they are similar. And that's what we're doing when we're comparing. We're really trying to figure out how two very different objects could even be similar. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, so I want you to try this out. Okay, I think you can do this. Remember way back at the beginning of this series when we were talking about indoor recess and outdoor recess. Okay, so now I want you to do this assignment. I want you to go across each row of indoor and outdoor recess. And I want you to think about how the details are similar. Remember, they might say the exact same thing, or they might say something slightly different. But your thinking voice has to engage across the rows to see how they could be similar. That's what we're going to do. And then I want you to orally use one of these transition words, okay? These transition words, pick one and try it and just use the details. Then I want you to actually write it down. I want you to just put this on a piece of notebook paper, or I want you to maybe type it into a Google Docs if your teacher wants to see it. And then I want you to use these stems as you're writing it down. And that's how people compare. When they have two very different topics or texts, then they are looking to see how these two very different things are similar. And that's how readers compare. That would be your assignment if you were in Mrs. McCullough's class, but your teacher might have an even better idea.